that the junta would not bow to pressure to reinstate Bazoum. Meanwhile, the African Union has issued a 15-day ultimatum to the junta in Niger to reinstall the country's democratically elected government. Now, those ultimatums do not seem to have been heeded, as the standoff has intensified, with groups of junta taking over the streets, brandishing weapons and singing war cries. Associate Professor of African Politics at UNISA, Professor Evaristo Benyera, joins us virtually now for more on this situation. Professor, good to have you with us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina. Good morning to the viewers, and thank you for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. What are the actual issues in Niger that led to the current situation?
A very complicated, a very historically build up to the events that occurred recently. How can we characterize them? Adios France, bonjour Russia, so to speak. And in a way, we need to wind back to 1958, 1960, when former French colonies were invited to France by the General Charles de Gaulle to receive their independence, so to speak, some of them without even having asked for that independence. So when the so-called Francophone African countries were given their so-called independence, there are four aspects of their economies that were retained by France. These were, number one, French retained control of their military affairs. Number two, their finances. Number three, their resources. And number four, their international relations. So the Francophone bloc were granted independence minus these four aspects, which are actually the core of independence for any state. We all know that in West Africa, there is something called the CFA franc, to a point where even the minerals that are being mined in Niger, 25% of the European Union gets its uranium from Niger, yet that uranium accounts for 1.2% of Niger's budget. So these are issues that have been boiling, these are issues that have been coming up, people saying our country is so rich. How come we are one of the poorest countries in the world? And the straw that broke the camel's back was when the president was now in cahoots and was cozy with the West. That gave an opportunity for what I can term, if there is a term like that, Sakina, emancipatory views or revolutionary views to liberate the nation from the state. I hope I did not complicate things.
No, indeed not. And, appreciate that background there, Professor. So, if we go back and we take a look at a view that has been expressed, that ECOWAS has essentially been struggling with what has been termed a backslide of democracy in the west of the continent. And you look there at the recent coups that we've seen in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, and now in Niger. They sent, of course, ECOWAS a delegation to Niger to basically put those ultimatums to the military junta, which the junta rejected. So given that they haven't been able to deal with the latest three coups in that region, what sort of prospects do they have of actually reversing the democracy here in Niger?
What we are seeing playing out, Sakina, in West Africa is the elusiveness of the democratic dividend in the neo-colonial West Africa. West Africa, or to be more precise, Francophone West Africa, remained a French protectorate. Whatever happened there was always in the interest of France, to a point where the United States and France have a military base each in Niger, and the Pentagon has 2 drone bases in Niger. This shows you the amount of interest that the West has in Niger. Straight to the issue of ECOWAS. ECOWAS is not that strong in terms of being ethical and just leaders, in terms of the presidents that are there in ECOWAS. look at one of the biggest economies in ECOWAS, Nigeria. President Tinubu assumed power under a cloud of uncertainty. So they lack that power morally and whatever to go to Niger and dissuade these military junta to do whatever they are about to do, given that there are some within ECOWAS that have continued to perpetrate coups on the people. I am thinking here of the Ivorian president Alassane Ouattara. He extended the constitution beyond the limited term in office so that he can continue to rule. Is that not a coup by an ECOWAS leader on the people? Yet ECOWAS did not rebuke one of their own. So what we are seeing is an extension of crony politics, the ECOWAS members trying to protect each other, and then the people of Niger siding not only with the junta, but also with the Russians that they are calling to say, hang on, Wagner is being effective in protecting weak, vulnerable African states in exchange of natural resource exploitation. It has been useful in protecting Mali and Burkina Faso. Can we also not have the Wagner group protecting us as opposed to the French, who have not been very supportive for the past decade, Sakina?
And speaking of the French, Professor, some commentators say that this coup actually represents a major setback for French President Emmanuel Macron, raising questions, of course, about France's 1,500 soldiers in that country, another 1,000 soldiers in neighboring Chad, and questions are being asked about the future of the influence of the French government and its strategy in the region, bearing in mind the reports that France has said that it will protect its French interests, as you pointed out. It will protect its interest in that area if the events lead to that. So what is France to do at this point?
This is why I opened this interview with Goodbye France, Welcome Russia. We are entering in uncharted waters in this fight for the survival of the empire. The French economy is underwritten by resources from West Africa, especially its former former colonies. And without that, I think France will degenerate into what were called third world countries, because on its own, France, Belgium, and so on, they need to loot African resources in order for them to survive. Let's just look at France alone. France imposed sanctions on Russia, meaning that it closed the tap for gas and oil from Russia, and in turn it depended on uranium from Niger, and then it is being booted out of Niger. This will actually be a very big energy bind for France, because its own uranium deposits were finished in 2001. And right now, its mine, there's a French mine called Orano. It mines in Kazakhstan, Canada, and Niger. And as you know, Kazakhstan is very close to Russia. Niger is also now gravitating towards Russia. That leaves France with only Canada as the source of uranium. And its nuclear sector is one of the biggest in France since the past 40 years, contributing immensely to the economy, to a point where it is the third biggest sector of the economy in France, contributing about 6 billion euros. So Sakina, all I'm saying is that this is more than French soldiers going home. This is about the resources that have been underwriting the French economy finally being depleted, finally being withdrawn. And what we are going to see here is, I don't know, because right now China controls the battery production, and it's definitely uncharted waters. I cannot throw in the issue of sentiment. There is a huge anti-Western sentiment. There is a huge pro-Russian sentiment. Is the former Cold War being extended to Africa? Is the Russia-Ukraine war being played out into Africa? Russia is then throwing in free grain there. Uncharted territory indeed, Sakina.
So as we wrap up the discussion, Professor Benyera, we had that ultimatum by the African Union. They gave the junta 15 days to reinstall the country's democratically elected government. But we know what the junta's stance has been on that. But how do you foresee this playing out?
That is a foregone conclusion, Sakina. Niger is not the Gambia. The Gambia is a geographically, militarily, and economically small country that they quickly encircled, and President Yahya Jammeh quickly surrendered. This is Niger. It has got one of the strongest armies in West Africa. It is the army of choice when it comes to the West, that it has been partnering in fighting those insurgencies in the Sahel region. So this is a well-equipped professional army, and I don't think ECOWAS will be willing to spill blood in this. They need to find another solution, which of course must involve France, which of course must involve Russia, and we are back to square one, Sakina.
And I think just to complicate matters further there seems to be rumblings, Professor Benyera, that the other countries that have seen coups, we spoke about Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea, they, I believe, from the rumblings, have kind of indicated that they may also want to support the junta in Niger if push comes to a shove. So that further complicates the matter.
This is why I asked the question, is there a liberatory coup? Is there something that we can call an emancipatory coup? Because now, you see, Niger is a very strategic country, not only for the West, but also for Africa, because it shares its borders with 8 other African countries: Nigeria, Benin, Burkina Faso, Algeria, Libya, Chad, and Mali. So whatever happens in Niger obviously affects these countries, and it's just complicated that the democratically elected president ended up being himself undemocratic, promising a lot of things and delivering none of those. And the military, being people said, what is the role of the military in the post-colony? Is it to protect the state, or it is to protect the nation, i.e. the people? And in this case, the answer of the military, not only in Niger, but in the majority of former French colonies, is to protect the people from the state. On the other hand, ECOWAS and the African Union are choosing the other route of protecting the state from the people. And now we are seeing almost a confrontation, and I think it is the people that are going to win, because every state draws its mandate from the people.
And that was Associate Professor of African Politics at